Hello, friends. I'll let you all begin gathering to join me for my special guest today. Hello. Yay, there's Sunny. Okay, I'll do a little intro. Sunny,
Oh,
hello.
amazing. Hi.
Yay, welcome to the program.
Yay. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. So,
I'm
Sunny, in
more excited.
addition, he is one of my favorite people. We've actually never met in real life, but we have lots of fun chats about saving the world through apps. Sunny is, well, why don't you tell us? Tell us your story of where you're from and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. So I'm Sunny. I was born in India, in North India, in a state called Punjab. And when I was 11, my family, we decided to move to Canada. And then I grew up in Canada for a good decade and a half. And then I moved to California, and now I've been living in California, and I run my own app development company, and we made the Marysia Do Magic app, which is creating a lot of magic in the world right now.
Awesome. Well, let's start off. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about what it means to grow up in Punjab? Am I pronouncing that right? Punjab?
um,
Punjab?
that's pretty good. But the how my dad would say it is Punjab.
Punjab.
Punjab, yeah,
Punjab.
yeah,
Okay, the emphasis is on the job.
yeah.
Punjab.
Punjab, yeah,
Okay.
right.
So, what is it like to grow up in Punjab?
Um, by the way, one more thing in my bio, I'm also a coffee lover slash addict.
Mm.
Um, yeah, what was it like to grow up in Punjab? So I grew up in a city called Chandigarh. So Chandigarh is technically on the border of Punjab. It's supposed to be the capital. Um, and like we had extended family, like my dad's brothers and sister and my mom's sisters. They all lived in Punjab, so we would visit them a lot in like villages in Punjab. So that was kind of my growing up in the first 11 years. And what it was like, I mean, it was just interesting. It was looking back at it now, we were in a third world country. Now that I've been living in Canada and California for 2 decades, looking back at it, I think there were a lot of strong religious ties because I grew up as a Sikh, and in Punjab has um, majority of the Sikhs of the world. Either they're in Punjab or they're in London, England, or in Toronto, Canada. That's where the Sikhs are. Majority of them are. So I grew up as a Sikh as a religion in Punjab, and it's interesting being in Punjab. Um, Sikhism is very much tied to the Punjabi culture as well. Um, yeah, so it was very. I guess my growing up was very culturally oriented, doing a lot of Punjabi cultural things, a lot of Sikh religious activities like going to the Sikh temple and making food for everybody. Like one of the things that we do at a Sikh temple is we make food for everybody to have for free. Um, but yeah, I can get into more details in any of those.
I actually heard from Jasper, our
Yes,
photographer friend. So, my
who's
photographer
also
for the
Punjabi.
app is also Punjabi.
Yeah.
And he said that actually, after, I don't know if you know of this, but after the attacks on 9/11, a lot of the Punjab people started to prepare food to give to the firemen and other people who were working around there, because that's just part of the culture.
Yes, a big part of the culture, we call it seva,
Hmm.
SEVA, which is to serve others and to serve your community. And the regular seva is by when we go to the temple, we make food for people, but also in time of need, like when 9/11, or now with the California fires happening in California, um, there's a big Sikh group, and they're going around and helping people with whether it's food, providing shelter. Yeah, that's a big part of Punjabi culture and the Sikh religion, I would say.
In yoga, we talk about seva too, quite a bit.
Right.
So, and I didn't realize that it had its origin in Sikh culture. Do Sikhs do yoga?
So you know what's funny? I didn't do yoga growing up. Um, Primarily, it was like as growing up as a Sikh in Punjab, I did know about yoga, and my family used to talk about yoga, but it was considered to be, at least where I'm from, it was considered to be something that the Hindu folks do. Uh,
Hmm.
but I think just the Punjabi culture and Sikh religion has a lot of roots in the Hindu religion because Sikhism was
What's the
born from
difference?
Hindu.
Oh, okay. So is
Um,
Sikhism like a sect of Hinduism?
I'm not sure if I can say a sect, but it was born out of um, like our first Sikh. So Sikhs have 10 gurus or 10 prophets, if you want to call them. Um,
Okay.
they grew up. The first prophet, I believe, was born out of a Hindu family. Somebody fact check me
Hmm.
on this. I believe that's correct. Um, my mom and dad used to tell me a lot of stories, and now I'm a little embarrassed to admit I got to go back and refresh them. But in short, the Sikh religion was born out of a struggle that was happening in like 1400s, where there was a war um, between different groups in India, where there was this like one of the empires. He was like one of the Mughal empires, I believe, and they were trying to either kill or convert people to a different religion, kill or convert Hindus. And then Sikhism was born out of that struggle as a warrior religion. And so there's a lot of like warrior related aspects to the religion,
Mm.
kind of born out of that
What
struggle.
does that mean? Yeah, so you got warrior blood in you.
I guess I think we all do to some extent, right?
I guess so. Yeah, yeah. So what does that mean to like be born of or to have a religion that's born from warrior culture? Like what are the traits of a warrior? Because I know in yoga we even call the poses warrior one, two,
Right.
three. I have a feeling it's somehow related. Like what in Indian culture or Sikh religion do you attribute the idea of a warrior?
Yeah.
Like what qualities?
What qualities? I think first one that comes to mind is discipline. I think when I think about growing up, discipline was a big part of us going to the temple and doing the various activities of the Sikh temple. Like one of the things I
Hmm.
remember I was mentioning to you in preparing for this was my mom, like in that first 10 years, my mom would make me meditate at the temple. And part of that was me chanting a mantra, and I would sit cross-legged for a half hour. And I feel like that
How
was part of the discipline.
how do like Indian parents get kids to do that? Because there's no way. Like when I think of my nieces and nephews, there's no way you could get them to sit still for a half hour. Like what were you afraid of them, or did you just like how do they do that?
Yeah, I need some parenting tips from my mom when I have my own kids. um, yeah, I think part of
Like
it
what were your
was
memories around sitting still like? Sorry.
um, my legs going numb. My legs going numb. But you know what's interesting? After sitting still, after doing the meditation, I do remember feeling so great.
Hmm.
feeling just at peace. Um, I think one thing that's important to note in growing up in India as a child, at least in my family, there is just this like underlying fear from your parents because because the parents are, in India there's no, I'll be candid, there's no like there's no rules of parenting, and like parents hit their children. So my mom, and I think that maybe happened a little bit in my growing up. I was fortunate to not have my parents hit me too much. Um, but I think, but they were very strict. Like my mom sometimes would just look at me, and she would just give me this like death stare, and then immediately I would just be like, yeah, okay. And I feel like that had just kind of caused. Um, so there was this almost like my mom's dad was a guy, my grandpa, who served in the military for so long. So like discipline and orderly rule was a big part of her household, which was also kind of, I think, related to growing up as a Sikh.
Hmm. Okay, and then why did your parents want to move from India?
Yeah. Um, so there were a couple of reasons. One big one was my mom's sisters were already in the U.S. since I was born. Um, so there was always this like attraction to come to the U.S. because they would send me toys, and they would send us different kinds of chocolate that we didn't have in India at that time. So there was always this attraction, and for me as a kid, but for my parents, it was they looked at they they really saw the American dream, or the North American dream in this case, because we came to Canada. Because they saw in India, unfortunately, that no matter how hard they worked, there is just so much corruption at every level, starting from the government all the way down to the janitor level, and every single individual worker, that there is a ton of corruption. That people who succeed are people who have a lot of money or have a lot of power through knowing people. And I would say my family, we had a moderate amount of all of those things, maybe a little bit less than moderate. So my parents really saw that, okay, I think for us to create a good life for us and our kids' kids, going to America is the right move.
Do you think Americans realize the opportunities that we have here?
No.
Yeah.
I hate to generalize, but no. In all my
That's one
American
thing
friends
that,
I have.
yeah, it's really interesting, like having lived abroad and also just having close friends who live in countries that are, not just India, but even places like Bali or other places in the world where, you know, like I hear people say like, "Oh, only in America do they drive like this," or American
Yeah.
like, I'm like, "You guys, come
Yeah.
on! Like, we drive pretty good here. Like, it's all." But then you compare it to Zurich, and yeah, I guess we do drive like animals, but it's so relative. India, I don't even know how the driving works there at all. It's just intuition. I think people hit the road and just like go.
It's funny you mentioned that. I think in India, just culturally and just the population overall, I think intuition is more at play in India compared to America, where I feel like we kind of push our intuition down because we're more in the favor of science and intellect. And I don't think there's
Hmm.
wrong with either or. But I
Hmm.
remember Steve Jobs, in Steve Jobs' biography, he mentioned that he never saw intuition the way it was used in India. He never saw that in America.
Can you talk more about that?
I think it's just like when people are driving, there's lanes painted on the road. There's three lanes, but literally it's a one-way traffic, and there's six different six different layers of people going, and it's not just people, it's cars, it's scooters, it's bikes, there's cows on the road, there's people walking, and I think they're just people just use this just intuitive sense and just kind of roll with the punches. And if somebody cuts you off, they're like, okay, I'll just go this way. Yeah, I think there's just, it's kind of hard to explain. I think you really just have to go to India and really live there and be part of the culture for like multiple months. And then you start to just see it's like, wow, people just kind of just roll with the punches, go with the flow. And they kind of just have this intuitive sense. There's this underlying intuitive sense of just how they go about their day, relatively more so compared to the folks in the US, I would say.
Yeah, it's amazing when I think about how things get accomplished there.
Guatemala is the same. I gotta go to Guatemala.
It's, I mean, even just meeting up with someone, sometimes it's like, I don't even know where this person's going to be. They don't quite know where I'm going to be. Like, how is this going to happen? And then somehow you just bump into each other. Like, it's where I feel like in the US, there's like, you gotta, like with my mom, she'll like preset the GPS like 15 minutes before she's going to get in the car just to make sure that like everything. Whereas like India, I feel like you get in the car and then you figure out where you're going by just like ending up there. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
crazy, but
And
there's
I
a
think the
magic
trick
to it that's really special.
there's yeah, I think at the surface it can seem really ugly, but there is kind of a magic to just how traffic works in India, and I'm sure we could talk about many other examples. And I think there's something about it where I think folks in India they tend to just handle and be okay with uncertainty.
Mm.
Whereas I feel like in the US, including myself now, because I've lived here for 10 years in the US and 10 years in Canada, um, I feel like I've kind of gotten a little soft because we do have a lot of certainty around us in our civilization here. And I think I just like, because talking to my mom is always a reminder of this. Like I see my mom, she just handles uncertainty so much better than anybody I know.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So, and then what was it like for you when you moved to Canada?
So I moved to Canada when I was 11, and I remember I had a lot more hair back then. I had a turban. I had one of those like kitty turbans as a Sikh. Um, so at that time for me, I was very excited because I always wanted to be in North America, watching Hollywood and just imagining I'm gonna go there. It's gonna be just be like Hollywood movies. Like it's gonna be like Dazed and Confused. I remember watching Dazed and Confused when I was in India. Um, it's gonna be great, Candy. So I was very excited, and I think actually all of those excitements were fulfilled to some extent. Um, but I think that there was for me, it was a bit of a struggle of just fitting in, because I looked different. I visibly looked different. Not only am I dark skinned, I had a turban. And I remember the first year I came here in grade six to Canada, and I remember like overall I fit in pretty well because we moved to Toronto, and there were a lot of other Indians and Sikhs there, so I kind of find my sense of belonging there. But I do remember there were instances where people would just like come up to me, like kids in class, and they would just like touch my turban, and they're like, "Hey, what is this?" There were fortunately, only a couple of those kind of instances. I didn't experience too much of that racist behavior, I guess, but there definitely, from my perspective, there was definitely a culture shock of just coming to Canada. I would say even now, 20, 25 years later, I still am going through a continuous culture shock, but it's at a very smaller scale
Hmm.
because I have my deep programming from India.
I feel like I'm going through a culture shock every day, just being like, what is this world that we live in? Because I mean, like, look at us. We've never even met before. We know each other fairly
Mhm.
well. We've come from
A lot of
totally
Zoom
different
calls.
places in the world, and we connect deeply on like the desire to share yoga and betterment with technology. It's mind blowing to me. Um, but actually, yeah, tell me
Yeah.
more about. So you're saying you feel yourself going through these culture shocks little by little. What are some examples of the programming that you've inherited and your realization that you want to move away from it and the process of moving away from it?
Yeah. Um, I think one of the ones that came to mind I'll get a little personal if that's okay.
Please
Um,
do.
um, I came across, I kind of discovered this about myself in the last couple of years doing therapy. My therapist kind of helped me get this out of me and pointed it out, which was I think I have this deep rooted perfectionism in me,
Mm-hmm.
and that has tended to manifest in my personal relationship with my partner, with Erica, where like
Mm-hmm.
going through our relationship at different times, like I realize I get too much of a perfectionist in the relationship, wanting things to be a certain way. And other
Mm-hmm.
times I'm okay, I just kind of roll with it. But it's ironic. It's like many times I roll with the crazy traffic, but other times I really need things to be perfect.
Mm.
And it's funny in therapy we're sitting and I'm a big proponent of therapy, by the way. So going to therapy and just kind of just talking about various struggles and deep issues that I was having, um, that I was just experiencing and kind of talking them out. What we started to discover was I've had this deep rooted perfectionism from India, where my parents were very much, um, they like they hammered it into me that when I go to school and I do, I take the math exam or science exam, A minus or A is not good enough. Have to get A plus. I would come home with my report card, 95% in chemistry. My dad would look at it like, next time, 100%. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, can we please celebrate this just for 2 minutes?
Yeah,
Um,
I can relate to that too. I remember very clearly when I was 8 years old coming home from a spelling test and I got an 8 out of 10 on it. And my dad,
eight
I
out
was
of
like,
10.
Dad, I did my best. And he was like, if this is your best, then you're not very smart.
You got 80%.
Yeah, I mean, I was 8, but you
Right.
know, yeah, I think that that's something that's, I've definitely noticed amongst my Indian friends and even with my husband with his Indian employers and bosses, that's something that's there. But I think a lot of people in a lot of different cultures, especially when you're an immigrant and you come to a country to make a better life, and if you have an accent or you look different, you feel like you have to be not just as good as everybody else, you have to be that much better.
Yeah. And I think um, there's a big aspect also of like showing how we are to other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
The keeping up the
Mm-hmm.
Joneses mentality is very much
Mm-hmm.
also lives in India
Yeah.
and whole Indian culture. Like my whole extended family is very much like that. Buying the
Mm-hmm.
big house, buying the car, showing our family's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
As everybody got problems.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think of like that kind of culture in LA where I lived for 10 years, it was
Hmm.
often like Persian, Indian, Asian, like with the big flashy Hermes belts and,
Yeah.
the rolling up in the Porsches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like we got here and we made it kind of a statement.
I think there very much is that, and I think that's part of the immigrant mentality, where it's like a lot of immigrants they came from nothing, and all
Hmm.
they've wanted their entire life is to have that Armani belt and that Gucci purse and the big house. So it's funny,
Hmm.
like now me and my partner we're talking a lot about like tiny house living,
Mm.
which like tiny house is like a very small home and it's very efficient, so you don't get mortgaged up the wazoo. Um,
Hmm.
And it's so funny. Like I feel like 3 years ago, I wouldn't even have been able to have this conversation because I was so caught up in success means having a big house,
Hmm.
and I had this like deep rooted that I need to have a big house just because I want it. We don't really
Hmm.
need a big old house, but just to show there was this deep rooted sense. But I feel like as I grow older and I do personal work, I'm moving away from a lot of that programming of like needing to have materialistic possessions to show off
So
and
if
feel
you
good about
were, yeah, if you were to meet yourself 3 years ago,
it.
what, or, say there are people here that are watching that are like, yeah, I'm like that, I'm stuck. What offerings do you have on ways to, how did you move past that? What
Mm.
advice could you give?
I think the first and foremost is don't be afraid to hang out with a diverse group of people. Because I think many times when we just hang out with our own kind or people that have similar upbringing to us, there's not much room for change because we're just in our comfort zone.
Hmm.
We don't even know where we need to change. I feel like a lot of my kind of experience has been when I hung out with people who were very different from me. Like my partner is, she's the opposite of me in many ways, and it's beautiful, and I really appreciate that. I think putting yourself in uncomfortable situations in that sense, and also for me personally, and maybe this is different for everybody, is having some sort of self awareness, self realization practice. And for me, that comes in the form of meditation, journaling, and therapy.
Hmm.
I would say those two things they really help me kind of see my own programming and kind of work out of it.
Hmm. And what was the catalyst that made you want to make a shift?
Mm. Um, about 5 years ago, went through a rough breakup.
Hmm.
I think that was probably one of the catalysts I would say that made me just kind of turn inwards rather than
Hmm.
being outwards. And that
Right.
wasn't just a breakup. Um, meditation, journaling, and what was the third? The third is therapy. Um, that I mentioned. Sorry, back. I just saw the comment. So,
Hmm.
um,
Thank you.
yeah, I would say breakup. Breaking up. I broke up with a person, this ex girlfriend of mine, but it was more so breaking up with a certain lifestyle that I was carrying. I
Hmm.
was into this. I was in my 20s. I had a deep. I had a huge like party party habit and hanging with friends and hanging with certain people that all they wanted to do was party and do um, drinking and just kind of have a little reckless lifestyle. Um, I was still holding down an engineering job while this whole thing was going on, but I think and I think part of that came was it was also I was dating a certain type of person who was kind of overall toxic and destructive for me. So I
Hmm.
think breaking up with that whole lifestyle, when things came to an end, it just kind of made me think like the dust settled and everything just went quiet. Whereas in that party mode, everything's so loud and going and everything's happening, and then 2 years later, everything just kind of slowed down, and I was left alone, and it made me turn inwards. I picked up various books. Like my one of my friends gave me Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer, which that book completely 180'd my life. um,
Mm.
Another book I got was a couple of books by Eckhart Tolle and New Earth and Power of Now. Um, and I think those books really gave me the roadmap and gave me awareness of, oh, how life can be different. And I think that just kind of like it was a thread that I just kept pulling on, learning more about meditation, spirituality, and just self help in general.
Yeah. So you grew up with the meditation and then kind of there's a philosophy
Mm,
in Taoism that believes that we're born innocent And then we go through all these trials and tribulations so that when we return to that innocence, we have appreciation for it. So at first,
Mm,
meditation is just something that makes your legs kind of tingly. And then you go through the whatever,
yeah.
and then meditation becomes this thing that brings you peace, that there's just another level of appreciation for it.
Wow. It's like the universe had a plan all along. And you know what? That meditation that my mom taught, Marisha is the universe. She's controlling it all. Um, you probably are. You know what's funny? Like when I was 5 years old, 5 to 10, my mom gave me this mantra. And this mantra is called the Mool mantra. Mool, Mool, and that stands for
Mhm.
root. And it's like a sentence in Punjabi. To say it all takes me 30 seconds. And that mantra, she taught me, and through discipline, I just learned it, said it a lot of times between 5 to 10 years of age. And then I went away from it in my teen years, in my 20s, because I was partying, I was going crazy.
Mhm.
And then when my whole life crumbled and everything broke apart, everything fell apart, that mantra came back to me. And
Mhm.
I honestly say that mantra like saved my life. Because so exactly what you're saying, like went through all the trials and tribulations, and I went back to all the learnings I had when I was 5 years old from my mom. So I'm so eternally grateful for my mom's parenting, even though she did, through discipline, she made me sit there for 30 minutes and made me say this mantra again and again. It's almost like she knew. She's like, you'll need this eventually in your life.
Mm. Can you
And
say the
that
whole
that night,
mantra?
can I say the whole mantra?
Hmm.
Yeah. Do you want the translation or the actual one?
I want the actual one first.
Okay. It takes 30 seconds. You sure?
30 seconds is no time.
Okay. Um, we're in the time space continuum anyway. It's all one thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So here's the mantra. It's Ik Onkar Satnam Karta Purakh Nirpau Nirvair Akal Murat Ajuni Sahipang Gurprasad Jap Ad Sach Jugad Sach Happy Sach Nanak Hosi Be Sach.
Cool. And
Just saying it feels so much peace.
yeah, and that is that in Punjabi? Is it what language is that?
That's Punjabi.
Okay.
It's really the real language is Gurmukhi, which I'll be
Mm-hmm.
honest, I'm still working on it. Like a lot of my pronunciations are probably really off. Um, but yeah, it's Gurmukhi that which is a root language of Punjabi.
And how does that relate to the Hindu language?
So somebody needs to fact check me on this. So Hindu language, I believe, evolved from Sanskrit,
Right.
and I think Sanskrit and Gurmukhi were close in origins.
Okay. So it's close to because I once read in a Deepak Chopra book, someone wrote here, words are so powerful.
Yeah.
And he believes that Sanskrit is such a powerful language, and in general, ancient languages are because they're roads that have been paved over and over. So the intention behind the words has more energy behind it because that many more people have been endowing it with
Wow.
energy.
Wow. I buy that.
I
And
like
I think
that
because of
too.
that, they carry certain energy in their vibration, would you say?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when I say the mantra, I visualize the meaning of each word. Usually I have my eyes closed
Mm-hmm.
and I visualize the meaning of each word as I say it. And I'm hearing myself say it too.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's one thing that I'd like to point out, even just for people who are getting into meditation or journaling. When we think about our gratitudes and stuff like that, sometimes people have a detachment. Like they're like, I'm grateful for, my
Right.
family. I'm grateful, but it's more mental and it's
Intellectual,
not,
right?
yeah, it's like, I know I'm grateful for these things, but do I feel grateful? And the difference between the two that you just emphasized is a world of a difference. You can in your head have a great life, and still be depressed. I think that's a huge issue today. Even I've heard, some very successful world famous yoga teachers discuss coping with depression. And I feel like it's because culturally we've globally, I think, but in the US very much so that I know of, people are just superficial. It's the superficiality of like, okay, I'm doing all the things that should make me happy. I'm doing the things
Check in
to
the box.
fulfill. Yeah, I'm doing the
Check in the box.
things.
Yeah.
I'm
Check the
getting the
box.
grades. I'm making people proud of me. I'm cute enough and whatever. But then there's still a void because there's not an awareness of how you personally relate to the things that society or your family or whatever put on you.
Mm.
It's an idea of who you should be that people can fulfill, but if there's not that authenticity, there's a huge chasm, I guess, between the soul and the spirit and the life that you're living.
And I think you're missing out because there's this
Mm-hmm.
whole world that you're not discovering because we're too stuck in the head,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And actually, can I share a quick personal experience
Please
there?
do. No need to
Because
rush yourself. It's the
you
Sunny
mentioned
Show right now.
the Sunny Show is gonna go on for 3 more hours, guys. Just kidding. No, everybody's staying home, right? Come on, hang out with us on Instagram Live for 3 more hours.
Yeah, I
Um,
have my friend from Jordan, my tour guide at Petra on the channel here. He was making some
oh,
comments.
oh,
Yeah, yeah, we got
cool,
we got
cool.
all over the world. It's all about
That's
you
all.
right now, Sunny.
Saint Mo, my boy Muhammad up in here. Yeah, you know what's funny? It's so beautiful. You put it so well. A gratitude practice for me has been journaling. My journaling contains a big part of it is the gratitude practice, where I'll
Hmm.
write down things I'm grateful for. And when I started this a few years ago, it very much was a mental exercise. So let me think about all the things I'm grateful for. And what I realized in the last, I would say, year to 2 years, and it's getting stronger every month now because I'm really making an intention. I'm realizing the gratitude practice is a heart practice.
Mm.
And I'm realizing the mind is just, it's the vehicle to access my heart. So every time I say that I'm grateful for this phone because it lets me communicate with people, I'm really feeling that, oh my God, if I didn't have this phone, what life would be like. And I'm really feeling how good it is. And I'm grateful for my brother who supports me. And I imagine like what it would be like if he just died tomorrow, which could happen. People die all the time. That's what people
Mm.
do. We die eventually. And I'm feeling like what it would be like if he was dead. And that just helps me trigger a feeling, a heart feeling in me that yeah, I'm so grateful that he's alive and he's here. And we can get on the phone and talk. And to me, it's just like that feeling practice changes any mood that I'm in.
I
I've been
love
meaning
that.
to write a blog about a gratitude practice. I'm just too busy. Need to make time. I'm a big proponent of the gratitude practice.
Yeah,
Perspective, yes.
yeah. And so you moved from Canada in Toronto, where you had a large Punjab community that you were connected to, and then you moved to Silicon Valley, right?
Yes.
Where
I'm
there's a
currently
ton
in
of
Silicon
Indians,
Valley.
where there's a ton of Indians too, right?
There are a ton of Indians here. I would say the population is a little bit, the demographics are a bit different, where I would say
Uh-huh.
there's more North Indians in Toronto, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm a North Indian Punjab.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like the majority of the population in Silicon Valley is more South Indians.
What's the difference culturally?
It's a night and day difference. We don't understand each other's language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a lot of close South Indian friends that I don't understand their language. They don't speak Hindi, and I don't speak like either Malayalam or Telugu. And I think there's a bunch of other languages in South India. Um, and the food is quite different. I think there's some parallels, some similarities. And I think in complexion, we're also a little bit different. Color complexion. Yeah, I think it literally feels like a different country, two different countries.
Yeah. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about complexion and how that plays out in Indian culture?
Complexion like skin color.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The big part of complexion is being lighter skinned in India, at least
Mm-hmm.
where I grew up, is considered to be more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could be the most attractive person, symmetrical face, beautiful features, and if you're really dark, and this I freaking hate this.
Yeah.
This is just this is the reality. You go to India, this is the reality. You talk to any of my extended family, this is the reality. They just consider those dark a person to be dark colored, no matter how beautiful they are. They consider them they like dock 5 points
Mm-hmm.
if there is a point scale to try to scale to judge beauty.
Yeah.
Whereas fair skin is considered to be more beautiful, which is
Yeah.
so which is so ironic. I'm like, dude, in India, nobody's white here. This is why I think we worship white people, subconsciously.
Mm. Yeah, I had a student in Singapore who she was in advertising, and her job was selling skin whitening products to people in India. And, it's really interesting how um, that psychology can be exacerbated also and propagated with marketing and products, and it's just more stuff
Oh,
people have to do and buy.
heck yes. You look at any ads in India, it's really funny watching any Indian shows. You look at any ads, everybody is so fair skinned in the ads.
Hmm.
And even you look at the actors. And I would like to think, and I do think there's change happening
Hmm.
in the last few years where people are getting away from kind of that thinking, that mentality.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it bothers me.
And then tell us a little bit about your theory as to how that happened.
My theory as to how it happened, I this is my opinion.
Hmm.
I would think it has something to do with that the English ruled over India for 300 years.
Hmm.
And I think us just being used to the white man and the white woman ruling over us, ruling our forefathers, we were essentially slaves to them. Um, and still, there's a lot of, and when India got independence, it was a freaking beautiful day. And this whole last few decades have been beautiful because every step at a time, we've been getting more, getting kind of taking the shackles off of slavery and
Hmm.
English rule. Like, one example is many of the cities have been renamed, right? Because we don't want to be reminded of the slavery. We're new people now.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's so beautiful to see that. But I think there's some like deep rooted. I I don't know. I think there's some deep rooted reason to that white folk ruled over us for 300 years, and I wonder subconsciously we've learned to put the lighter skin on a pedestal.
Yeah.
I believe. I don't. I'm not.
Makes sense.
There's no scientific backing here.
It's okay. Science will catch up with you later. So when, and then you had, I mean, as a female yoga teacher living in Asia, I definitely experienced a lot of resentment from Indian teachers.
Oh,
Can you tell me, from your perspective, why Indians and women too sometimes um, don't like it when I teach yoga.
Mm. Yeah, I think I've seen this happen many times, this play out many times in our household, in our Indian
Mm-hmm.
household, with our extended family or just friends, where there's many times been this conversation of these white people, these American people, they take our stuff, but we do it the best. They try to do it, but we do it the best.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just this huge, I think, like looking at, and again, I'm generalizing here, obviously. Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody does this.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely don't do it. I'm very grateful for all the work that you do, the work that you have done. Um, but I do think I have definitely met people who look at that, very close family members actually, who look at that and saying that these white people are coming to India, taking our yoga, taking our meditation that our forefathers came up with and making it their own. And they're so caught up. And to me, I feel like it's they're just so caught up in ego and seeing each other as separate and and thinking that they own that. Whereas, yes, people long ago
Mm-hmm.
came up with it. You personally didn't come up with yoga, right? And to me, it's like
Definitely not.
it's the property of humanity. To me, it's a shared understanding, shared property. This is my take on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what I've experienced, and I think this is natural, is like younger teachers tend to embrace change. And I mean, my teaching style is very, very non-traditional. So, I'll play pop music in classes and I'll,
Mm.
I have people just, shaking their booty or whatever. And there was one time I was teaching at the Asia Yoga Conference, and this was a very different, like not American Western yoga. Like I was
Yeah.
the only person really on social media. These teachers had like disciples around them. People like people were wearing the whole turbans and garbs, and there I am in my crop top and like leggings. So I definitely was
Yeah.
not what people had expected anyway. But when I taught, I felt it was quite nice that some of the Indian students came to my class, but then within a few minutes, a bunch left. And I
Yeah.
looked at my watch, and Deepak, I love Deepak. One of
Yeah.
his tracks just came up on my Apple Watch for some random reason, and the thing that popped up was fear.
Mm.
And to me, like I think that it's not. I've had people say like, women are hated in that culture and things like that. And I don't
Yeah.
know if hate is something that's that real as much as it's fear of losing power, fear
Hmm.
that maybe what they're like, some of my peers that I taught with in Singapore, they come from lineages of yoga teachers where for generation after generation they've been teaching yoga, and it
Hmm.
may appear, I can understand, kind of arrogant for someone to loosely learn the background but then decide it's not really that relevant right now because I'm doing something different with my students.
Yeah. Yeah. I think at the surface, I mean, as a human, I understand it. That is like somebody may look at somebody in the West teaching yoga and be like, "Hey, you're butchering the practice of how it's supposed to be," right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and me personally, maybe not with yoga, but with other things, I've definitely done that where I've passed judgment and just jumped to conclusions. Um, but I find myself in those situations. I think what I would say to those folks who are getting pissed off and thinking, "Hey, this person's butchering X, Y, Z," I would suggest them to lean in and get closer to this person who they think is so butchering yoga or whatever and experience one of their classes and see how they feel and look at the impact that they're having on the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think like at the end of the day, if you're having impact on the world, you taught in so many different parts of the world, and you teach here in the West. If somebody you're clearly having such positive impact, then if the positive impact is happening, then then why is that? It's so hard to justify that would be a bad thing.
Mm. Yeah.
So keep doing it.
Thank you.
I support it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for myself, I always, try to like if someone has a problem with me, my habit for so long is always to, take it on and lean in that way. But I'm kind of learning to do just a little bit more of the opposite of like, okay, like I'm doing my very best, but there's only so much energy and so much learning I can do without
Right.
exhausting myself. So I thank you also when I first started to receive more of like these aggressive comments from people. I
The hate
appreciated
from India,
your,
YouTube.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you too. That was really intense. Like it's one thing to experience it in real life from a few people that, I had teachers when I, would get the sniffles when I was teaching in Singapore, and they'd be like, because you're a yoga teacher, you need to like do, they're giving me all of their attitude, and I
Right.
just kind of was like, okay, and kind of smile and nod. But then eventually I just learned like I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and I don't think that that's definitely not just in yoga. I mean, I know it as in yoga because yoga has originated in India, and I can understand that.
Yeah.
But I think in different cultures, um, cultural appropriation of different things, it would be interesting to see how people continue to evolve and relate to shifts in how food is prepared in different places in the
Mm-hmm.
world, or whatever other martial art coming from
Mm-hmm.
Asia to the West, or different things, but people continuing to practice opening up their minds is something that I think is not easy, for people who have long-standing traditions that they're proud of. And that process
Yeah.
of opening up people's minds, I think, is one that you just have to be patient and respectful of.
I think that's the culture shock, right? We have so many of these
Yeah.
cultures in the world, and like it or not, these cultures and people are mixing. We have this thing called airplanes, which aren't too active right now, but we have this thing called the internet right here.
Yeah.
There's people worldwide right now watching this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because your audience is worldwide. And
Mm-hmm.
culture shock is happening, whether you like it or not. Don't hate the play, I hate the game. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
feel like my wife, she made Indian lasagna. She made Punjabi lasagna. If somebody could look
Love
at that, some
that.
Italian person could look at that like you're butchering lasagna, you know? But it was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say one more thing. Oh, I think at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in that you just gotta be your authentic self, right? You didn't grow up in India knowing the yoga roots. You grew up in the West, and you learned about yoga, and you see how it's impacting your life, and you're trying. I think you're trying to pass that on to other folks that you come in contact with, and you're having positive impact. And I look at you, Marisha, and I see here's a person who's being her authentic self, without apologies. And I think we
Thank
have
you.
to do. I think we have to do that because we can't make everybody happy. Because what's the other option? Go around make everybody happy?
I
It's
mean,
impossible to get consensus and make
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, and then you just end up shriveling up into nothing in so many
Agreed.
ways. Because if you don't have I mean, and the process of discovering your authentic self, can you tell us a little bit more? Because you came from a culture where you definitely had a lot of expectations put on you, and I feel like you've done such a good job of making your parents proud and also being true to who you are. How did you do that?
I hope I've made them proud. I think I have, more or
I
less.
mean, you're an engineer, you know, you did the
I'm an
thing.
engineer. Yeah, must be engineer, doctor, or one of the other
Lawyer.
accepted fields. Lawyer, right? No, I'm neither of those now. I'm a business owner now, so yeah. I think my process has been. I don't know if it's as much my process or just kind of this path that this universe just kind of forced me on. I think I always just tried to listen to my heart, um, and sometimes that involved rebelling around what my mom would tell me to do, what my dad would tell me to do, and sometimes that involved turning down a really well-paid job and starting a business.
Mm,
And because I was like deep in my heart, I know this is what I want, and I think I just always just doubled down on whatever my heart wanted. And I think not to get, and I think just even listening to the heart for me has been a process.
yeah.
Because many times the heart is tricky. The heart and the mind are tricky. Sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
mind will evade you, think that it's the heart. Sometimes like I get real, you know, desires and it seems like it's the heart, but really it's my desires and programming in my mind.
Yeah.
And I think listening to the heart is so it's a process to tune in to the heart's frequency. And for me, that process has been meditation, and heartbreak is a great medicine.
What are some signs, either physically or otherwise, that help you know the difference between when your programming is speaking to you and your desires versus your heart?
mm. Yeah, I think there's a very much a a physical sign that I see when
Mm-hmm.
a handful of times that I've made big decisions in my life. Like I'll take the example of starting this business, Breakthrough Apps, and going full
Mm-hmm.
time in it and turning down a really, really well paid job offer. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I went for once I decided to do it, like I was kind of grappling with it, like should I do it, make a pros and cons list, which should I go with? And when I did, I think we're gonna go off soon. When I did,
Yeah.
it, I just felt light. My body felt light.
Mm-hmm.
To
Mm-hmm.
me, like that was like the litmus test. Like I made the
Yeah.
right
Yeah. That's cool. I like that.
decision.
Well, on that note, I mean, I think that's some of the best advice you could possibly pass on. Listen to your
I'm just
heart
sharing my
and,
experiences.
and yeah, yeah,
I
I
don't have
love
all the
that
answers,
feeling
people. I'm
of
just sharing my
lightness.
experiences.
Yeah, it's your perspective, but it's a valuable perspective, and I'm so grateful that we got to hear from you, Sunny.
Thank you so much for having me on. This meant the
Thank
world to me to
you.
come on here and talk to you.
Yay,
Thank
it
you,
was
everybody,
my
for
honor.
listening. Hope to
Yay.
connect with everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you, Marisha.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Mwah.
Love you all. Bye.
Bye.